Tampa General Hospital and USF Health, Morsani College of Medicine are bringing the power of academic medicine to Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast. For nearly 2 decades, Tampa General has been ranked as one of the nation's best hospitals. And for over 50 years, Tampa General has been Florida's leading academic health system. Learn more about their growing network of physicians at tgh.org/the Palm Beaches. Welcome back to the Palm Beach North Podcast. I'm your host, Noel Martinez. In today's episode, I'm so excited to have my friend Alex Price here. He's a dynamic leader who's built a career at the intersection of corporate responsibility, community engagement, and public health. From shaping community investment strategies at Office Depot to helping lead the charge at Project Opioid here in Palm Beach, Alex brings a unique perspective on what it means to drive change that really matters. Alex, thank you so much for being here, my man, and welcome to the show.
You kidding? What an opportunity. I mean, I'm always wanting to hang out with you, but why not do it with, several thousand of our friends?
We do get to hang out often, right? Through our Leadership Florida connection. Yes. And all the fun stuff we do outside of our normal jobs, right?
We do. Never enough, but yeah, we can always step up that game. But
awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, my man. All right. So let's start from the beginning. Tell me a little bit about your story. Tell me about your background. Yeah. How did you end up here where we're at?
Long and winding road, man. It's interesting to be we're kind of the same generation. You kind of wake up and you're like, whoa, I've been on this rock a while now. Right. Time flies. I mean, native Floridian, but the joke is that I'm, from the same state, different country, from Pensacola, Florida. So it's like,
that is another country, man.
It's like it's the deep South part of Florida. And kind of grew up just kind of good old fashioned middle class, awesome family, had all the benefits of a loving family, was ready to kind of break out after undergrad, went to Florida State and decided, hey, let's kind of break out of the comfort zone. Let's go to New York City for grad school and just kind of see where that takes me. And life really changed then. So I moved up there 20-ish years ago to kind of start grad school, pursue what I thought was going to be a long and prosperous career on Madison Avenue doing the advertising thing. Watched a lot of those movies, and thought that was going to be kind of the glamour life that I'd have. And so interesting thing, got there, got a picture of all that, spent a few years doing that, and something kind of I feel like was missing a little bit. I was getting to do the storytelling that I love doing, working at ad agencies, but I think the stuff I was doing, which was shaving cream and razors and toothpaste and teeth whitening strips, it left a little bit to be desired in terms of purpose. And it was interesting. I took a job that was like a 50% pay cut, working for Michael Bloomberg and his administration, working on education. So it was like, hey, I want to do storytelling, but I want to do it in a more purposeful way. So moved up to Harlem to cut my rent so that I could afford to have this job. And for what was kind of his 4 years, his middle term, I got to do kind of roll up your sleeves, good old fashioned in the tough neighborhoods, community work, in that case in New York City. And it was it was like getting a doctorate in all things community. Good side, bad side, how philanthropy works, how businesses can be involved, how hard it is to solve social issues. Like everyone likes it, but like how complex that could be, and especially in urban areas. And I thought I'd stay there forever. I met my South Florida wife up there, and eventually she brought me back down here to South Florida. But really what was cool there is I got to meet Jessie, my wife, which led to being a South Floridian. But I was able to find a way to take my passion for storytelling and to bring it into the social purpose realm. So I got to do what I like doing in a way that just felt like it was the best use of my time and skills.
At what point did Jessie say, okay, it's time to go to South Florida, we're going? So tell me about that. Because when I met you, you were with Office Depot.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. How'd you end up down here?
So, we wanted to have a family. We're both being Florida kids. We kind of wanted to raise a family similar to how we grew up. And I saw, working in the schools of New York City, I saw how tough that can be. So we wanted to kind of do the family thing down in what we thought was kind of like, how we grew up. So we came down here back in 2010. It's crazy. It's been over 15 years, and got here and was like, hey, what do I do now? I'm now, I feel like philanthropy and community had kind of, in some ways, it kind of ruined me. I couldn't go back to like another type of a job. It was sort of like, okay, I got to have one of these purpose jobs, but also going to have a family. I got to find a way to support them too.
Pay the bills.
So I started looking around. I was like, okay, Palm Beach County is where we landed. South Palm Beach County for us. We landed here. I was like, okay, what companies are down here? And just so happened, just a stone's throw down the road from where we landed was ADT Security, and their world headquarters was there. I said, oh, maybe I'll toss a resume that way. And a man who became my mentor / boss / father took a chance on me, brought me on at ADT to do PR. But then 6 months into that, ADT decides to spin off, become its own public company. And they need a foundation, and they need a community relations department. My Bob Tucker, who is my boss, a wonderful, wonderful man, said, hey, all that experience you had up in New York City, why don't you lead this thing, buddy? And it was one of those moments where I feel like we've all hopefully had that boss or that person who sort of, for no reason that you've earned it, allows you to do things you had no qualifications and no business doing. They just throw you in the deep end and say, call if you need me. And he was that guy for me. And I feel like I got to kind of like take a decade's sort of leap all in 1 second. And so, yeah, but I kind of grew up as a philanthropist really at ADT in Palm Beach County. It was awesome.
At what point did you say to yourself, man, this community work, I really, really enjoy being in the community, being out there, making a difference? At what point did you say, this is it? This is what I got to do for the rest of my life?
It was interesting. So right away, but it was interesting. It wasn't, because in this work, and we work in kind of adjacent sort of stuff, right? This community-centric, civic-centric type work was, while I did enjoy the sort of the finer things that you got to do sometimes, you got to do the galas, and you got to go to those cool press conferences and all that. I found I was like, wow, I really, really like the gritty aspect of this work. What was just awesome to me was like those times when I was like, got to go out an hour west to the Glades because there was a charter school out there that needed, we were going to put on a field day for them, or we were going to, do some sort of mentoring type activity, or just those moments that were, always giving me perspective of what I had, of how everyone should have equal access to create a great life for themselves. But it happened in those roll up your sleeves, in the trenches moments. And I fell in love with that. And I started to really it was really life-giving for me to be amongst folks who were just like me, who had just come from, a tougher beginning. And I was like, man, this is kind of what I'm put on earth for, I think.
So now you are working with Project Opioid Palm Beach, right? Where did that come from? Like, where did that?
Yeah.
Tell me more about it.
So it's interesting. So Project Opioid, which by the way we're transitioning the brand to Project Overdose, and I'll tell you about that later, because for reasons we wish weren't the case, the issue is broadening into other substances. So we're evolving with it. But Project Opioid was actually launched at a Central Florida when the then president announced in 2017 that the opioid crisis was a national crisis. So Palm Beach County's got an interesting history with opioids. We were kind of ground zero in the late 90s, 2000s from the pill mill crisis. We all remember that, the overprescribing crisis, the sober homes that weren't really doing things in an ethical manner. And Palm Beach County and its leaders and people like Dave Ehrenberg, a very successful crusade against that. And it was interesting. We have in our history solved phase one of the opioid crisis, but like a lot of crises, it evolves and things change, and we've got new phases. Fentanyl was something that didn't exist back then, so you get this, it's interesting to think in the history of the world, drugs have always come from plants. It's always come derivative from a plant, a seed, you name it, but an organic substance. Super dangerous, but from an organic substance. So for the first time in human history, drugs, fentanyl being the first, it's just a chemical compound. It's just a chemical that's made in a makeshift laboratory that's usually 50 to 100 times more potent and deadly and cheap as you can imagine. So, drugs have always been an issue, but the potency and the toxicity of it is something we've never seen before. And that's only 10, 12 years old.
So tell me about the mission of the organization.
Yeah. So the mission has not changed, which is to solve the opioid overdose crisis through collective impact. And I'll kind of unpack that in a second. So we're evolving programs and approaches all the time to be nimble to the nature of what's happening, but it's always still that. There's a lot of different models out there. Project Opioid is sort of based on the platform of collective impact. So that's like, take a social issue, homelessness, could be mental health, could be an incarceration or whatever crisis or issue that a community, city, or county wants to impact. So it is that roll up your sleeves approach of saying, okay, who are the influential centers of a community? So you got your business community. So I would say, let's step back. Typically, it's the government and nonprofits that are at the tip of the spear on a social issue.
Oh, yeah.
And you need them, Mike, when they're fighting the good fight. But oftentimes they're going it alone. And as an issue becomes really, really complex, collective impact, our model is let's bring in kind of non-traditional partners to the table. Let's bring in business, small, medium to corporate. Let's bring in the faith community because there's a lot of influences in our church, synagogues, and mosques and other places of worship. Are there some courageous politicians that want to get involved in a kind of difficult issue? Oftentimes there are. It's getting private philanthropists, the private foundations that maybe are disconnected from this issue. How can we educate them? Oftentimes you'll find they have a family story and they're looking for a way to get involved on that. And so it's bringing in unlikely parties, and dare I say bipartisan. I know that's a word of the past, but we don't believe so. So bringing Republicans, Democrats actually together to work on something. So our model is to bring the sectors, to create a coalition that can be as big as it needs to be, but think 30, 40 key leaders, CEO type leaders, educate them on the issue. And then we say, okay, in our community, what are the gaps? And so a Project Opioid will come into a county, not with a pre-description. It's like, okay, what does Palm Beach County need? What are we doing well? Let's promote that and do more of that. What are the unoccupied lanes? Oh, let's get involved in that.
So what's the business community's role in this, in this issue? How can the business community really help and support?
Tell you what, when a business community collectively says this is important, whatever that is, things start moving. We've all seen that with different initiatives and different policies. Because let's face it, there's a lot of influence. There's a lot of resource there. There's there's a loud megaphone there. And so we call it a new front line. So you always think about the front line on an issue. It's your nurses in the ER. It's your therapist in the agency. But hey, who is the caretaker of this big swaths of people in our county? It's employers. And I would say, faith congregations and other membership organizations, but employers where you're spending 8 to 12 hours a day, right? You think about it, you spend 8 to 12 hours a day somewhere, you got your health benefits there, that's probably your most influential relationship in your life. And so if we can inform and equip and instruct a business, say an HR department, and how to be really effective at saying, hey, I think so-and-so is really struggling, or I heard their family member is really struggling. How can we want their employment to be secure, but let's get them the help they need. Let's get them healthy and back on their feet. Because this is it's a workforce issue as well. And that, there's certain industries we've seen that are kind of exponentially impacted. Construction, kind of high pain. We see, sometimes like the bar restaurant industry.
Yeah, I was going to say the hospitality industry probably too, right?
Just the nature of it sometimes and the access. And so, it's saying, hey, you as an employer have an opportunity to if we engage you, we can probably solve this community as, collectively. But, and so we train. So it's educating them on, hey, this is a big deal. And even though it may be off your radar, it, statistically speaking, is impacting some percentage of your employees.
So I'm assuming there's got to be some major challenges coming into a new market like Palm Beach, right? I mean, you've been in Orlando, been extremely successful in Orlando. What are some of those challenges here in Palm Beach that you're facing right now?
Noel, I had to tell you, as well as I do that when you come in and like you've done such a great job of inheriting a chamber and taking it to the next level. And everyone just sees the results and like, wow, yeah, it must just come easy to him. And I know blood, sweat, tears, probably sleepless nights. I know that's really hard.
You do know.
And because everyone wants to see, say, a problem solved or a chamber grow and flourish. But you're asking lots of busy people to do things they don't have to do.
Things that they might not be comfortable with, like they don't know much about.
I mean, right? And so it looks good at the macro, but really when you're going to so-and-so elected official or so-and-so business owner and you're like, look, I need you to step up and take this on your back. And they're like, yeah, I got 20 other people asking me to do 20 similar things like that. And so I would say for me, this has been the most interesting year of my life, going from a funder for a decade and a half. And all of a sudden the tables turned and now I'm all asking for money. Actually, that's probably the easiest part. It's asking for people to champion something. And it takes probably every bit of, I wouldn't say persuasion, but like just dogged, never give upness that I've had to really, and I'm sure you've done this at times in your life. I've had to pull from deep within on some days when you get a bunch of doors closed. And again, everyone's busy, right? And you understand that. But you've been chosen to lead something that you believe in. So I would say that it's hard to keep any issue in this day and age top of mind over time, right? Yep. We're bombarded with so much and there's so much going on. If you find yourself as the advocate for an issue, you have to every day in, day out champion, storytell, share data, and keep it front of mind because you're competing with every other message out there.
So you and I have talked before about the difference between writing the check and asking for the check. We just talked about this last week, right?
Oh man, yes.
So what's the difference? What's harder? Because for years you were writing those big old checks.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of fun.
It was, I bet. But I'm sure that was difficult too, right?
And what was difficult about corporate philanthropy was, so internally, you are the person that is championing philanthropy for an organization that's in the business of making money, right? I mean, so whatever it is, whether it's security systems or school supplies or a Comcast, so it's cable and whatnot. So they're in the business of selling a strong product and service and being profitable. And they care about the community, but obviously that's a secondary thing. And so you might be the one or two or three people whose sole job is to remind, hey, remember our commitments we made? Remember that budget we said that we would? And you have to be the constant kind of champion and cheerleader and advocate internally. And you got to do that when you've had a good quarter and you've had a bad quarter and during a pandemic and during a financial crisis. And so the challenges there are more internally. And even the best companies, there's just pressure to reduce those programs during hard times. And you got to defend that. But the external part is a joy. It really is. And there's an ease there, but there's tension internally. Where here I would say everybody internally, say at Project Opioid, is completely all in on this cause. There's an ease internally, but there's challenges and friction and headwinds externally. So it just kind of flipped.
Of course. Yeah, of course. What does success look like for the organization? And can you share like a recent win that you're extremely proud of?
Yeah. So success, I would say, so qualitative and quantitative. So obviously this is a data-driven game. It is, right? Like we know how many people die of overdoses. We know how many people have non-fatal overdoses, and we know the addiction numbers. So like this is a data thing, and we can do that by county, oftentimes city and zip code sometimes. And so there is a scorecard here. It's one of those things. There is a scorecard. I know that, but these are lives, but you have to measure it in math to know how your programs and how your interventions are doing. But then I think our biggest win, and we really started this launch less than a half a year ago. The win has been the who. It's who we've been able to bring around in a short period of time, because what we do isn't super dollars intensive. We do need fundraising to put on big forums and events and trainings and all of that. But what it's leader intensive. It's about looking at systems. And if we see something, it's having someone who can influence that system. So we've been able to get the right people in a very short amount of time. I'm thankful that I didn't just move here to do this. I needed every year of my 15 years here to build trust. Otherwise, it would have probably taken years to get to this point. So very quickly, we've gotten the right people. And that's been one of the biggest wins. There's other things I'm proud of, but that's the critical piece.
Are there any personal stories or experiences that have really changed the way that you approach this issue, or stories that you've heard of some of your colleagues?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, once you start getting out in front of this issue, it's like the floodgates. You realize people in your life you had no idea had dealt with this personally, or lost a friend, or had a teen that struck. Boy, and people don't like to talk about it, but once you start doing this work, they kind of open up. And so there's been ways to connect on some big levels. We know this is a young person's issue, but boy, about a month ago, this came to our front door as a family. My oldest daughter, who's going to be 15 soon, plays travel soccer like so many of our youth down here. And one of her fellow team members, a fellow 8th grader from a great family, it appears fell victim to what might be opioids. And we don't know, there's still confusion around it, but it was, wow. Something we know people are thinking of college kids, obviously high school, but boy, to think middle school, and someone that was in that close proximity and in community with my daughter, it made me realize that you look at the data, the trends, but this is about very fragile lives. And it's about one bad decision. And boy, it got real personal real fast.
Oh my goodness. Well, you know what? I want to get into I want to talk a little bit more about community impact and some other partnerships that you have. But before we get to that, I want to take a quick little break for our medical minute. We'll be right back.
All right.
All right, so we're talking with Dr. Alberto Ortiz, a nephrologist from TGH Advanced Kidney Care. Doc, thank you so much for being here. Let's talk about kidney disease. I hear it is a silent killer. Is that correct?
That is very correct. And kidney disease, you have to lose about 80% of your kidney function in order to have any symptoms at all. And once you do get to that point, the symptoms are very non-specific that you can find in other conditions like generalized weakness, fatigue, and poor appetite.
How do you treat it?
So we have, when you get to that point, we have what we call renal replacement therapies, and it consists on hemodialysis, in which we have a machine doing the filtering of the blood and replacement of the kidney. And then we have a kidney transplant in which you get another kidney from somebody else.
All right, so that sounds bad. I don't want to get there, Doc. So how do I prevent it?
So we have different therapies that coupled with good lifestyle modifications and good healthy eating and exercise do go a long way.
Great, Doc. Well, thank you so much. And that was your Medical Minute brought to you by TGH. All right, so we're back. Let's talk a little bit about community impact, right? Building partnerships is a big part of this. What's your approach to connecting local organizations and public agencies?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, when you lead a small organization from a personnel standpoint, if you want to make an impact, it's all about the partnerships. You don't have the manpower to make the impact you want. And the interesting thing, of course, is that partnerships, what we bring to the table is the opportunity to transform the community. But what we bring to the table, we're not offering dollars and we don't have those kind of bargaining chips, right? So really the approach is honestly, it's educating people on the dire nature of the issue. You know what was interesting in forming a partnership very recently, Noel, was I was speaking with a very senior community leader in Palm Beach County who I deeply respect, and but as I got on the business side, and as we got into the conversation, I was like, this is a very sharp person who hasn't had the latest briefing on this issue. And if I can bring them along to understand that, again, statistically speaking, it's probably a massive concern within their workforce, and that they could make a big difference on it. But I realize sometimes it's quickly educating people on how this is most likely impacting them, and getting them a seat at the table. I mean, I got to tell you, I had a phenomenal conversation with folks in the health and benefits department at FPL earlier today. Mm-hmm. Obviously some of the smartest people in our community, work at FPL, and it was like, hey, they said, hey, we're big and we have these kind of sophisticated tools and policies. They're like, how can we bring our expertise to help the small and medium-sized business community, which we have so much of in Palm Beach County? And so I was like, well, that was a really neat thing to say, hey, they probably have access to kind of the latest things that a big company can do from a mental health perspective. How can they impart some of that to how that would help a small and medium-sized business in their own backyard? So it's finding that win for them. It's like, how can a company be involved? A public agency is different though. A public agency, they're experts. And a lot of times they're in it so much, it can really be helpful to bring, say, a business leader with a fresh eyes that may not understand, pick the system. Let's say our 911 emergency response system. Mm-hmm. And the experts, they're in it all day long, looking at it all day long. Can it be really healthy and enlightening to bring, say, a business CEO to kind of look at that and just provide a fresh perspective? So we have found that that's another way to bring business people involved, to say, hey, smart people who maybe can provide a whole different kind of fresh perspective on something. And it's bridging divides too, because, in any community you've got long history. You may have entities that had kind of done some of this in the past. And so one of the things that we do is to try to come in and to help try to heal that when we can. Yep. And bring people together, with one common goal in mind, which is saving lives.
What about the healthcare sector? Like what's their part in this? How are you partnering with them?
So, so that's your traditional kind of front line, right?
Yeah, you would think, right?
So this is the interesting thing. So where we're winning on this crisis is we are actually saving lives. So over the last few years, Narcan, the overdose reversal drug, it's really gotten out there, and people have kind of adopted that at a mass scale. And so we're seeing the deaths are going down, amazing, but we're seeing drug use, addiction, and non-fatal overdoses going up. So we're saving lives, but we got a long way to go to get people back on their feet and back to living a full, whole, healthy, restored life. And so that's where healthcare comes in. And so what we want to do really with our healthcare ecosystem is really refine what navigation is. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
No, I'm not.
I wasn't either. Don't worry.
So tell me about it.
I didn't know a lot of this not long ago. So navigation is really how you successfully take someone from, say, crisis situation or intervention to get them to the right care that they need, therapy, you name it, and to stay with them through that. And they may have to go many different ways. There may be, different health providers that they get transitioned to over time, and then eventually back to, say, full employment and living a addiction-free life. But as you can imagine, people get lost in a system, right? They get passed. It's like, hey, here's this card. Go see that clinic. Great. And there's no follow-up. And there's no, there can be a lack of watching and holding someone's hand through a system. And people fall through the cracks all the time. So it's like, how can we get a community to work really, really in an integrated way? Because it makes sense, right? Someone calls 911 or 211, or now it's 988. And, there's someone to call. We always say, so there's someone to call, someone to respond, and somewhere to go. So you've got, say, 211, someone to call. Then we need to have someone to respond, perhaps to come to their house from a therapy perspective. And if it can't be solved there, perhaps to get them to a physical location where they can get the help, perhaps, long term. And there's just a lot of opportunities to fall through those cracks. So it's really looking at the system and how we can get all of our healthcare entities, government, private hospitals, clinics, our healthcare district, all working in unison.
What about, so Palm Beach County is huge.
Yeah.
Very diverse community.
Huge. Bigger than some states, right?
100%, right?
Yeah.
So, and there are a lot of communities that often get left out. So how do you guys ensure that your work is reaching those communities?
Yeah. So you're right? On any issue, there's always been, hey, the Western communities are neglected or have been historically in a lot of ways. Or, sometimes we say from a philanthropy perspective, you almost got like 4 or 5 different areas, right? You got the North County, you got Wellington, you got West Palm, and you got the Boca del Rey. And people don't talk to each other and they like to stay in their bubble sometimes. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about a countywide issue. So we need everybody talking to each other. So I think we come into a community with a lot of humility, Noel. So it's like saying, hey, and especially, and I know Palm Beach County, but think about if I go into Dade County or Hillsborough County, it would be the wrong approach to think, oh, I understand. You have to build a team of advisors that can make sure that you don't have any blind spots. So it's like pulling in people from, say, our Glades and our Western communities. It's getting, municipal leaders from some of our cities that sometimes struggle on these issues, maybe exponentially. And it's building your team of advisors and then listening to them and saying, hey, like, what am I forgetting here? Who are we leaving out unintentionally? And listen and realize that you as yourself, you're not the expert. We try to create a collective that will guard against that. Because oftentimes, you see, these big initiatives that really help one community and people get lost. You want to know one of the most uncomfortable and really convicting things about all this has been? And we're 80s kids, right?
77.
Okay, I was born in 78. Okay,
right, good. We're the same age.
We don't remember the 70s, right?
We don't.
But we remember the 80s very well. And that was kind of, that was a drug crisis that was sort of kind of got played out as we were children. And as I've taken on this current drug crisis issue, I've had, some really wonderful, trusted friends from the Black and Brown community, people that I love and who have just thoughtfully said, hey, I want to get involved and help on this, but I need to share with you some feelings, my community, in this case, perhaps the Black community, which was really when the cocaine and crack crisis was destroying so many people's lives back when we were younger. There wasn't that level of concern amongst certain communities to get involved and eradicate that crisis. A lot of people like to look the other way back then. And when I hear those things, man, it hurts my heart. I realize that they're just speaking the truth and that it's really important not to repeat the sins and mistakes of the past, learn from that. And know this is a crisis that impacts all of our young people, especially. But those conversations were hard, but they were really good to have. And I'm really glad I had some friends that I could really trust in our Black community that felt like, I'm going to share this with Alex. He needs to know that and the history of this type of work, and just to have his eyes open on that. And we've had lots of kind of tough, real conversations like that, but I'm thankful for him.
So let's talk a little bit about policy and advocacy, because I'm sure that's a big part of all this, right? So in your opinion, what policy changes are needed to really move the needle on this crisis that we're having here in Palm Beach County?
Yeah. So there's a number of things that we're looking at that we're going to be announcing soon with the next legislative session.
Next year.
Yeah.
Next session.
That are going to be, a lot of them are going to be around those underlying issues of mental health. So in the past, a lot of these social issues were really looked at in silos, like homelessness, housing, drugs, that were all looked at kind of separately. But now I think as a folks in these space, and now I'm one of those folks, is saying we got to look at the underlying issues. And so I think some policies that are going to be around mental health for Gen Z are some things that we're going to want to push, and we'll be able to share more later. But Gen Z, man, Gen Z is struggling, I think, on a level we don't quite know. We're only 3 years removed from a global pandemic that they came of age in.
Yeah,
you know?
And that pandemic changed all of us.
Oh my gosh. And we had fully formed brains in theory.
Yeah. In theory.
You and I were still probably working on it. But we had the benefit of like having physically matured and cognitively. But if you're going through that cognitive maturation process during that, I mean, that was, we're going to be studying that for many years.
Yep.
And so youth, I think are turning to things that they maybe wouldn't have. And so we've got those are the policies that are going to be interesting. I think everyone likes the idea of that. I think the devil's going to be in the details for sure. There's also the issue of the, you may have heard of the opioid settlement funds.
No, I don't know much about it. Tell me about it.
No, so neither did I. It's huge. So the previous version of the crisis, which was the overprescribing of, say, Oxycontin, and a lot of big pharma companies made a lot of money, basically prescribing that to whoever had interest in it, and they knew the dangers. And the good thing is that there were big government crackdowns, lawsuits, and so that big pharma world that was sort of found to be guilty of the overprescribing is going to have to pay out millions and billions over the next, I think it's 15 to 16 years, to cities and counties and states as, retribution for their actions. And so usually on the county level, but state level in some bigger cities, they get rewarded every year certain tranches of dollars to spend against the opioid crisis. And I think that there's a little leeway in how that can be spent. So we just try to advocate that any dollars that are opioid settlement dollars, they are awarded to fight this crisis, do get channeled to fight this crisis or the underlying drivers and not other kind of pet projects.
All right. So this is going to be a major move. Advocacy is going to be a big part of what you guys are planning to do, at least next year, probably many years to come. So how do you get our policymakers' attention? And how do you get their support? How do you do that?
Well, so I've been encouraged. I have been encouraged. One of the first people that I called when I took this position to have a Zoom meeting was Senator Mac Bernard. Said, absolutely, when you want to talk, he connected. He's like, I get it. I'm passionate about this issue too. And so I didn't know. I was like, is anyone like, this is an uncomfortable issue. This isn't as rosy as and feel good as many others. And yet I've been pretty encouraged. At the same time, it's got to be just a nonstop, steady drumbeat. I mean, I saw you spending time walking the halls of the Capitol during Palm Beach County days. And that world a bit more than me. I feel like I need to kind of roll up my sleeves and learn Tallahassee more. I mean, what's been your...
We spend a ton of time up there. I mean, we try to go up for committee weeks. We try to go up, the Florida Chamber does a fly-in.
Yeah.
The more time you're in front of our legislators, the better.
Right.
But you got to be in front of them at home too. Tallahassee, Palm Beach County Day is the only time that you go to see them, right? So you've got to figure out how to be in front of them as much as possible.
Yes.
Thank God, we've got an amazing team that really works hard to do that. And an amazing group of business leaders in the county. I mean, we've got a great economic council, amazing economic council that's doing some great stuff from a policy standpoint. Our county does a great job of advocating on its own. And then you got some great chambers that do a good job, that go up there to advocate for the business community too. So it's a team effort.
Yeah,
man.
you all do a great job. I mean, I'm like,
it's a team effort.
It dominates my social media for that whole week. And I'm like, have a lot of FOMO, but I'm also like, man, I'm like, they're working it.
It's a lot of work, man. It seems like fun and everybody thinks it's all parties and fun. No, it's a lot of work. I mean, you're at the Capitol at 8 a.m. and you don't get home till late at night, but it's important. That's what, from a chamber standpoint, that's why chambers are started. Right.
Yeah, sure. Right.
That's the key, that's the fundamental principle of any chamber of commerce out there is advocacy. So we do it a lot.
You guys do a phenomenal job. And right. Look, in our state, we've got some really strong chambers and we have a business community that's really strong. They're also compassionate. I feel like I feel like that's why Florida's so strong in this part of Florida.
We're special. Palm Beach County's special. I know I'm biased.
Dude,
I say that all the
know.
time. But our county's special because they collaborate. They understand that in order to get things done in our community, the private and public sector have to come together and work together. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we're always going to be on the same side of things. But for the most part, we work pretty well together.
I remember we shared a text recently. It was about collaboration and saying, look, people want to operate and lead in this community. You got to be a collaborator because that's how we work.
One voice is stronger
Yeah.
than 1,000 small little voices.
Oh, yeah.
Right. One big voice is a lot more important.
And the proof's in the pudding because we're a really healthy community.
Mhm.
Can I just say real quick?
Yeah, shoot. Far away.
Because being a statewide organization, and I love Florida, and I'm from a different part of Florida. I love Florida. We are a really healthy community in terms of our leaders work well. No one's perfect, right? But we really, though, we have great systems, great leaders. People work with each other. It's collaborative. I think we don't probably realize how rare, like that is not necessarily the case everywhere you go. We do have something really special. And you can, when you're in it, kind of forget that is maybe not the norm.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. All right. You've had a lot of leadership roles in your career. So I just want to change things up a little bit.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what makes an effective leader in our community?
In our community, specifically in our community. So I'm going to say having terrific hair.
We're going to edit this out of there.
No. So in our community specifically, because again, we are so diverse in every way, right? We've got agriculture, we have urban, we've got, I don't know where we land numbers wise, but we're kind of purple in a lot of ways, but you've got the people on the other ends of that too. Our economy is pretty diverse. You've got to be a really nimble operator, I think. You got to be someone who can relate in all situations. You got to be who you are and authentic. But you got to be able to adapt. You got to work with, I know you do, the business community, the electeds. You got to be able to really understand communities in need and our service worker population who are so critical to us. And so you really have to become. When I say civics, it's funny because my kids, when they're like, I need help with civics, I'm like, yes, that's what I do for a living.
It's fun now. Now I love it. Back then, I didn't like it as much.
Right? I was like, what is this? Now I'm like,
boring.
I actually got a job in civics, sort of. I don't know. But I think that we don't have so much of an appetite of sort of it's my way or the highway. You've got to be able to be collaborative here. And you got to build trust too. I know that's true everywhere, but it's like how so many cliches are actually really true. You spend a lifetime building and you can lose it in 1 second. That is the most essential thing that I think that thankfully I've been able to build a little bit of that over these years, that people are giving me the benefit of the doubt, or like, yeah, I'll hear you out, or yeah, I'll meet you to hear about that, or you know what? Okay, we're going to donate to that because I know you're going to be a good steward of that. And without trust, why even try? You can't even try. So, but it's one of those things as a leader, especially as you progress along, we know we can lose that in one moment if we lose sight of what's important and make an unwise decision. So it can be very sobering to remember, hey, I built trust, but there's also rising expectations with that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
All
right, so let's talk about. I want to stay on you, right, in leadership and give people some advice out there. So
yeah,
you work a lot of hours, a lot of early mornings, a lot of late nights.
Yeah,
some very, very stressful days throughout your career. I'm sure you've had very, very stressful positions at times. How do you take care of yourself and stay grounded? I know you like to work out every once in a while. I mean, you're like a big ball of muscle, but what else do you do?
This is so critical for our generation now because I don't think any people in human history ever worked like we do. Like we work, right? We used to say,
but our parents' generation say we don't work, and then we say about the future generation they don't work as hard as us. So
I'm talking about Gen X, though.
Okay,
no one cares about Gen X. We're working hard because we're such a small. But like, isn't it cool that Gen X's we're at that point where like we are running things right now for a short time.
We're the old guys now.
For a short time,
we're the old guys.
We've got like a decade.
So how do you take care of yourself? How do you stay grounded?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So I had a very hard day the other day for a whole bunch of reasons, right? It was just it was a day of challenges and headwinds, and I was going home empty, and I came home to a literal like old school MTV dance party. And like I have 4 kids, and they had put on a show. It was a organized, choreographed show. And it was like at a moment I was like, oh, you know what? That's what life's about. We got to dance and through the good and hard times. But I would say, so that is true. But another thing, and I think this relates to you, and I would guess to many of our kind of public facing leader types, is that we know tons of people, and our friendly acquaintances are as wide as Lake Okeechobee. But oftentimes with that comes you mistakenly think I'm someone with lots of friends. And even you're so busy, and you have so many like enjoyable connections and whatnot. But over time, I think there's some leaders where they can, that core group can shrink, and they neglect it and they don't nurture it. So I think it's so critical, especially in these roles. Keep all the friendly connections and trusted partners. That's how you get things done. But boy, we all need that nucleus. That could be 2, that could be 5, it could be more than that. But you need to have people you can be real with, and people you can be like, how was today? It absolutely sucked. Can you please come over?
That's really good advice, man. That is really, really, really good advice. I really like where you went with that. I didn't expect that answer, but that was a great answer.
You need it, right? Because we have to put on, we're championing things that are important. So we got to put on a great public face, even on the tough days, but we need to be able to be real with people. And sometimes, if you have a spouse, sometimes you need to not dump that on he or she, but to have some other folks that you can just be real with. And so there's been times when I haven't nurtured that, but now I'm realizing that's time well spent.
All right, let's go back to future. I want to talk about Project Opioid or Project Overdose, as soon to be named Project Overdose. What's next? What does the future look like? Where do you see things heading here in the next few years?
Yeah. So from a county perspective, so statewide growth, but from a Palm Beach County perspective, I think Palm Beach County, and another 1 or 2 counties that we have in Florida have the unique opportunity to be kind of model counties for not just the drug crisis, but kind of mental health, behavioral health, to be one that other counties might study. Counties in Florida, urban counties throughout America. I mean, I think we could really be that case study that's kind of like, hey, here's how a big, complex urban county can tackle a public health issue. And so I want Project Overdose to kind of help in our leadership team to help spearhead a 5-year strategic plan. So what do we do the back half of this decade? What do we do here? Where do we want to be in 2030? I want us to be like, hey, like fly in that Illinois county, to come study what we've done here. But we need to do some very specific stuff and probably have some very strong metrics that we're shooting for. So a big movement here where we raise money, hire staff too. We've got a sizable staff in Central Florida. We want something comparable here. And so really to create the best practices model here. But then we're going to go south to Dade and Broward, we think, over time, and some of the other kind of larger urban counties where the ecosystems, while different, are somewhat similar, right? Where you have like a big kind of economic development agency, a couple of really strong chambers, a couple of HQs, so some of those other communities that kind of have a similar setup but every community is different, man. I got to tell you, you've seen one community.
Yeah, 100%. So we're just about out of time, but I ask every single guest this question because it really gives people some insight on who you are.
Yeah.
What do you want your legacy to be? Like, you've done some cool stuff, right? You've got a beautiful family, 4 amazing kids, an awesome wife. Jesse's awesome. I've gotten to meet her a few times, many times. What do you want your legacy to be? Like, what do you want your kids to tell their kids about you?
It's interesting. So I lost my dad when it'll be 20 years next month. He drove me to New York City for grad school. And then when he came, he passed shortly after on a run from a heart attack. Something we would have never known. And, he was not that much older than I am now. So I think about these things a little bit. And I hope I live to be 130. Jesse probably doesn't. She probably wants to have a few golden years, but I think about these things, and, I do think that we're all put on, whether you're spiritual or what you're not, I tend to be, and I think we're put on here for something specific. And I think that I think the Lord said that it's something that's supposed to be service oriented, and that old proverb, and forgive me for not knowing exactly where this old proverb comes from, but to whom much has been given, much is expected. And I think people like you and I, we've been blessed in a lot of ways, and a lot of people that are listening here have been blessed in a lot of ways, and they're in a position of influence in whatever corridor of society they are. But it's to use this time wisely, to use these resources wisely, to use these years to make an impact on others. Let the younger generation watch that, so we carry that on. I realize I've got 4 little people that are watching what I'm doing, and so they are my legacy. But I remember it was funny. I can laugh about this now. So when my dad passed 20 years ago, and there was this long line out the door of the funeral home for the wake, and it was like our entire life's worth of people came through, and a bunch of his enemies came in. And I'm sitting there in the receiving line. I see them, like, they couldn't stand each other. Oh man, they coached against each other. They were this and that. And I couldn't believe some of these people who were like the adversaries, and they came in and said, yeah, didn't see eye to eye to your dad, obviously, but boy, did I respect him. Boy, did he care about people. Boy, did he fight for what he believed in. And I remember I was like, he lived a short life, but man, that was a life well lived. I'd love for one person to say that about me. And so for me, I just, that purpose-driven life, that's more about giving than receiving. And boy, I get it wrong all the time, but I want to get it right more often.
That's awesome, Alex. That's such a great answer. All right. So how can people get some more information on Project Opioid?
Absolutely. Well, we have
Look right into the camera. Tell them where they could get more
Would
information.
you believe we have a website? Yes, we do. So projectopioid.org. And when we rebrand, it'll still forward to our website. That's going to give you all the information you know. It's going to give you information on how to contact me, our medical director, our founder. If you're a business owner, we need to get you involved in being part of the front line to care for your employees. If you're a nonprofit that's interested in this space, really, whatever part of society that you're in, you have stakeholders that are impacted in this, and we want to get you involved. So please reach out directly, Alex at projectopioid.org.
Awesome, Alex. Well, you were awesome today. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. It was fun. I learned a lot about you and who you really are as a person. So I really appreciate you being here.
Well, lead on, man. Thanks for giving me this platform. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, that's all we got for you today. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Don't forget to share, like, follow, tell all your friends about all the amazing things going on in Palm Beach North. See you soon. Thank you.